So where should we start?
I think we should start with introductions, eh?
Yeah, hi.
Ka poe.
Okay, kia ora. Ko Mick Ludden ahau. No Ngāti Airihi, Tipuna, engari no Ingarangi. I grew up in England, in Birmingham, but I come from a Liverpool Irish family, and I identify with that, even though I was brought up in Birmingham. So I've got a bit of a mixed sort of genealogical background and whakapapa, but that's where I grew up. And I came from a family of very strong Roman Catholic inclinations. I was destined for the priesthood at one stage, but it's another story. And always grew up, well, I became a bit of a lefty at quite an early stage, so I was involved, cut a long story short, involved with political activism in my youth, particularly when it came to racial issues. There was a period in the 1960s when some extreme racist stuff was coming up in Britain, very, very extreme, with immigration and stuff. So I got involved with that, which kind of in a lot of ways influenced the way I've got involved with Māori tonga in the long run. Not that I knew it at the time, of course. So anyway, this is back in the early 70s. I met this lovely Kiwi girl who was also from Britain originally, but she grew up here and fell in love and everything. And because I was on a bit sort of I was a bit of a bad lad and wasn't doing very well, and just like spent all my time going to work and going to the pub, going to work, having a laugh. And she sort of said, well, it's time to start growing up. And she wanted to come back home to New Zealand. So again, long story short, I followed her. Came to New Zealand, Aotearoa, and was very, very kind of homesick for a long time. Didn't like it here at all, but I was in love. And then this fella came along, and that was kind of, that made the decision. She's like, well, that's it then, here I am. And while all this was going on, fortunately, my wife, Peter Campbell, was teaching at Hiona School, which is now Lakeview. Wishy-washy name if ever there was, but lakes are wishy-washy, so fair enough. And she got to know another teacher there by the name of Mike Hollings. And so she is friendly with him, and she told me about this guy, Māori fella, because I was interested in Māori stuff. These fellas I like these fellas. They were like, you know, I'd meet a few Māori. I worked on a shearing gang and I thought, these are like my mates back home, you know, nice folk, good laugh, non-judgmental people, nice bloody people. So anyway, so she introduced me to Mike, and got on well with Mike, and he told me about this kapahaka group that he was involved with, Kahununuke Wararapa. They used to call it Māori Culture Group back then. Now it's all kapahaka, but back then it sounded like something on a cruise ship, you know. That's okay. And he said, why don't you come along? I said, how do you mean, you know? I'm not quoting precisely, but this was the drift. He's like, yeah, you know, come and have a look. Oh, and at the time that I got interested in this, and Mike was encouraging us both to come along and get involved, there was some kind of festival at Tuturamiri, which I knew nothing about. So he said, we've got this thing and you'll see the group and everything. Okay, so I went on this trip to the middle of somewhere that felt like nowhere. There was all this stuff going on. I can't remember what there was, you know, cake making and all in wrestling, I don't know, just stuff. But the focus for me was this kapa haka. I had no idea what to expect. And so they all came into this hall and started doing their stuff. And I was just overwhelmed. I just couldn't believe it, you know, the singing and the pew and the... The biggest hit to me was Piki Moyo. She's from like Gladstone area down there, those people down there. Anyway, she was a star. And could she move? And I was just watching this woman and her smile and her everything. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, and Mike says, well, do you want to join us? I can't do that stuff. There, come on. So I went to a practice, and this is before I was like, had any inclinations in terms of learning te reo. It hadn't even occurred to me. Oh, all this is just beyond me. Anyway, I went, and it was funny. It was lovely. I was welcome and that, and I'd join in, flapping about like an idiot and doing my best, and everyone was very supportive. And I remember Mike saying to me, he said, the real test, he said, because she's not here, the real test is whether Auntie Dawn Aparo will approve of you. He said she can be a bit scary, you know. I think he was having me on a bit, but you know, I was scared. And so the next practice and everything, I can't remember what happened, but for some reason or other, me and Auntie Dawn were like, quite quickly, she still calls me cuz after all these years, because this is like 1976, 77, something like that, so it's a while ago. And so when Auntie Dawn took me on board, that was it, I was in. So I was with kapa haka for ages. You know, went all over the place, even went to we were up in Auckland at the National...
Masterton,
yeah. Forget what year that was.
82 or 81 or something
like that.
Oh, and almost back at the beginning.
Well, yes, yeah. Oh, some stories there, but anyway, the sun will be going down if you get me started on all that.
How did that lead you into...
Oh, well, yes, sorry, I was going to say, you know, I'd been getting involved with this and enjoying it and loving it, you know. You know, because they'd say, can you sing? I'd say, well, yes, but not in tune. Oh, that's okay. Stuff like that, you know. And slowly, you know, it dawned and I was like, I don't actually know what I'm singing about, you know. So I started picking up words and trying to follow it. And to be honest, at that time, apart from Mike, maybe one or two other people, really, I would say most of the group didn't have much idea either at the time. And Mike used to say to me, you know, he'd done some sort of survey thing, that the number of native speakers, or te wairarapa, you know, kahanuna ki wairarapa, rangitane, minga hapu, had lost the reo. He said there was just a few, I can't remember what, it might have been 3 or 4 people, native speakers, from here. There was a few outsiders, you know, people had come down from, you know, like Nani Marcia and people like that, come down from the Rueras and from up north and that, native speakers. But even they, I would have to say, they might argue with me, because of living here, their reo had kind of declined too, you know, it was like that. And of course, I was, at this early stage, I was working the building trade, and I would meet racism that you wouldn't believe, you know, casual, you know, not directly cruel as in a sort of real full of, but just casual, all that Māori stuff. And so at the time that I was getting more involved with wanting to learn te reo and getting more and more involved, I was getting more and more exposure to this other side. Anyway, eventually Mike had started doing language classes at Makora, So I went to a few of those. And I have to say, I was never really good at languages. I can remember when I was at school, like I remember getting -5% in an exam for Latin, stuff like that. Same with French. You know. Useless. So I'll never learn this language. I'm 12,000 miles away. How am I Anyway, he said, come on. So I go to this, and it was lovely with Mike because he was teaching me in that sort of more academic sense, schooly sense, you know, books and stuff. But then he'd take me to the pub, to the Pioneer, pub in town there. And we would drink with the man, Picky Moyo's husband, Moses Moyo. Now, I think he was from up somewhere in Manawatu. So what would that be, sort of Rangitani, I suppose? Native speaker, but it was, you know, pub talk. He was a working class man. He had no time for all the just chat. And I'd listen to him and Mike and laughing and stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, what about? And Mike would help. And so that was sort of my beginning, you could say. Right, so, and then when these kids came along, I got involved with preschool, play school at the time. Got to know Nanny Marcia, from up Karimoana way. And didn't know she was a native speaker. Had no idea until Mike told me one day. She never told me. Mike told me. What? So anyway, things rolled on, and Kohanga Reo began. Ngāti Hamwa. But, well, we used to call it Nukatai Memeha then, yeah, Māori now. Well, still Nukatai, but you know what I'm saying. And so she and a few other people moved up to Ngāti Hamwa Kohanga Reo. Now, out of a sense of loyalty, I stayed on at play school. Not play school, what's it called? Play centre. Which was next door to the Kura. That little site on the corner there.
Yeah.
Te Aroha,
yeah. And I was with my little daughter, Manu, and she'd have been about 4, I suppose. So, as I say, a sense of loyalty, I wanted to go. Sissy Walker and them and all those people. Kohanga, yeah, Parimo, Parimo.
Yeah.
Kohanga. And I was like, oh, but I've been, you know, and I was on a committee and all that kind of stuff. So. And one day my daughter, I said, why are you so sad, Manu? She said, all my friends have gone to Kohanga. So that was it. I said, who am I here for, you or me? So I went to Ngāti Hamwa. And I was just there as a dad, and then the littlest Peps came along, Piki Hawariki. And so she was at Kohanga from, you know, newborn. Our littlest girl didn't speak a word of English till she was 3. Yeah. That's how involved we were. So gradually at Ngāti Hamwa, that's the real learning, as far as I'm concerned. I'd done my bit of basic thing in the pub and that, but being at Ngāti Hamwa, being at Kohanga, no option, you know. If you didn't speak Māori, you didn't get your breakfast, basically, you know, that was it. So I moved on and became got onto committee stuff and became the representative for Wairarapa of some sort. So I used to go up the coast to all these hui. That was magic, you know. So that's my...
But by that time, had you grasped the language? Were you speaking?
Well, you know, it was basic.
Yeah.
But I was, when I say basic, it was real, you know, communicating with the wee ones. So, you know, that helped. It wasn't very intellectual. Yeah, so, and it just grew, you know. It was like a natural way of learning, you could say. So I was very lucky, you know, passionate too and everything. And then I got involved with school, East School as it was, because when my children got to school age, well, I kind of drifted. And then Nani Hinyari Babington was retiring. And she was like, well, her and Ros Bartosh, were like motivators for Te Reo at the school. So much opposition, so much opposition. So anyway, they said, well, we need a teacher. Mick Ludden, you know, he's been to
A kaiako.
yeah, as a kaiako, yeah, not just a helper. I say just a helper, sorry. But yeah, no, kaiako. Oh no, you can't. I said I'm a teacher, because I qualified as a teacher in England, but gave it up, you know, went off the rails again. And they said, no, you'd have to retrain. It's been too long, and this isn't. And the communities, no, we need him now. So, big battle, lots of letters. So, another long story short, I got the job. At that stage, it was, I forget what it was called, bilingual or something like that.
Rafiti, yeah.
Yeah, Rafiti. We had this class and we had to battle. Principal, nice enough man, but he had no interest or inclination to really support us. In fact, the stronger we got, the more he resisted. Because we were wanting to move up from bilingual to more and more Te Reo class. We got there in the end. He resigned. Big battles. Gosh.
Big time my auntie Marama.
Well, that's a while later though. But yes, when she came, that was sweet.
Mm.
And we became total immersion class. I'll have a break there, so
Yeah.
I mean that's still reasonably early on, but that's the kind of background for me.
The 80s, yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, yeah. But oh man, the battles, you know, and because, sorry, one other little thing, because you need to talk to him. You know, getting involved with a more political thing, like, you know, that the lady saying kia ora and losing her, you know, the telephone lady, you know, remember all that? She was
I don't know. I was born in 1990.
sorry.
So
Before his
I
time.
can kind of remember things after 95.
Yeah, okay. Well, she's you know, on the old phone, you know, what do they call them? The
Operator.
yeah, that's the, yeah, and she's had the
They keep my
nerve to say kia ora, and she got the sack.
Oh, true.
Oh, Jesus. And like we would go around all the knocking on doors and pushing for Te Reo on the radio and stuff like that. God, it's a wonder we didn't get murdered, honestly. And then there was of course there's a Springbok tour and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Hard hats and all that stuff.
Right.
Fighting with big policemen. Because I met some wonderful people, oh God. Anyway, yeah, those guys, the old men, the old women, you know, it was like listening to bloody Shakespeare, honest to God. It really was. This is up on the coast, you know, up that way. God, there was one time, Nanny Marcia, sorry, it's your turn. Nanny Marcia, her mother, I think, she had a tangy anyway, I think her mother died. So we all went up to, what's the name of the place? Just before you get to the Waikaremoana, so it's right in Tūhoe. No, it's before there. It's sort of not far inland. No, it's a lesser known name. Anyway, we went to this tangy, small marae, and same thing. Mike kind of sort of warned me. He said, "No, you're in Tūhoe here, so you know don't get pushy." Because I did go through a bit of a phase of, because I could, you know, I was always welcome to speak on the marae, and I was proud of it and very honoured. But I got a bit, you know, I felt like I was getting a bit up myself. Oh, quarter Māori and all that. So don't get, you know, don't get arrogant, Mick. Calm down, know your place. So anyway, and he sort of warm here in Tūhoe, so don't go showing off. Hell no, no way. So we got there, and I was the only man with our rōpū from down here in Wairarapa. Marcia's like, go on. I said, well, you know, go on, get up there, call it up. So I did. I terrified and went, and they loved me. It was so nice. They just, you know, I was part of the whānau. So. Oh, happy days, yeah, wonderful.
Can I just ask, from your I guess, point of view, it just seems as though, like, learning the language, obviously there's those times where you get a little bit anxious about learning, and there's a lot of people who I speak to today who say that one of the things that stopped them from learning today was the anxiety over getting it wrong, over all of that kind of stuff, and then how the community is going to treat them when they're going through that process of getting it wrong, because everyone's going to get it wrong when you're learning. But a lot of people were afraid or had been really anxious about how others would react to them trying to learn to do it right.
Well, I think two things with me. One was, no, even three. One of them was because I was connected, you know, socially with iwi. So that was a big one. Another one was because, related to that, of course, you know, I'm a stroppy, or was a stroppy activist. So I was like, boom, you know, I didn't care. I wasn't like, I'm not saying I wasn't scared or nervous, but it was like, didn't matter, you know, okay, be scared, be nervous, whatever, just boom. The other one, big one, was in terms of not so much learning the language, but pronouncing it clearly and properly was never an issue for me. I could never understand why it was so hard for folk. Yeah. And quickly realised it's a lot of it to do with the fact that they'd always spoken like that, so it's really hard to break habits. I didn't have the habit. It was all fresh to me. You know, I'm a Pom, I talk funny, you know. Crikey, I had to change my own English so that the Kiwis could understand me when I first came here. So it was like, I just slotted in really easily. So, you know, I'll take credit, but at the same time, it was, I had an easy passage, you know. So that's my kind of experience, which I don't know how common it is, but that was certainly how it was for me anyway, yeah. As
an Englishman with like a lot of your own culture, I suppose, and with your Irish culture, and then that being tied in with your Roman Catholicism. Do you think that learning the language has also opened up another kind of door into this culture? And then, well, that'll be my first question. Like, how has kind of you been, you know, growing up in that whole Western upbringing, and then come to Aotearoa, learn Māori, and then be opened up to Te Ao Māori? How much of a difference was that for you?
It's a great question. You know, it made 100% difference and 100% kind of lift all of the whole Māori thing. But at the same time, it was like, at the same time as being that, it was also like reconnected me to my own past in a sort of a way. Yeah, I suppose you could call it a spiritual way. I don't consider myself to be a very spiritual person, but there is that sort of feeling. It like, I mean, I've always loved history anyway, but it kind of made me connect to my own tipuna, which I'm currently researching, by the way. Lost a lot of it, finding it all out now. So, you know, and feelings of like the loss of my Irish language. My mother spoke Irish a bit. You know, so there was a connection, but it was very thin, very sort of frail. So Māori tonga, in a sense, it replaced what was lost, and in another sense, it enhanced what was lost and brought it all back. So, yeah, very, very real, very strong, very, very powerful. We were at The other day, with the Mick the youngest daughter, birthday treat, she took me to the Turnbull Library. This was just this week. And you go into this exhibition, there's this picture from about the 1870s or something. There's this Māori lady, probably had a top hat or something like that. You know, they would dress up nice. And this little girl. And the little girl looked quite sulky. And she looked about 8 or 9 or something. And I thought, that looks vaguely familiar. And there was a little caption about him, this lady, and this little girl was an illegitimate, I don't know if it was her illegitimate daughter or something. I thought, jeepers, because when I was researching, sorry, I do carry on a bit, with my cousin in researching our family, and she, through the ancestry thing, found a long lost cousin who sent her a picture of this soldier in his uniform, First World War. It turned out to be, because my granddad was Mick Ludden. He was in the war too, of course. Man, should have heard him about all of that. You know, I worked in the army. I nearly got killed. They sent me to the Middle East and they sent me to France and to the, and he said, "You'll never catch me out on blooming, you know, marching and bloody load of rubbish." Yeah, he was a lefty too. But anyway, his brother, Uncle Pat, got killed in the war, you see. I'll try and keep it short. And in this picture, he was there with his mother, and you could see his hand was kind of a bit damaged, because what had happened was he'd been in probably France or Belgium or somewhere and got injured. So he was home on leave. As soon as his hand was a bit better, they sent him off to bloody Persia somewhere, and he got killed, you see, in this stupid battle. Pointless. Terrible. Anyway, break your heart, man. There's this little girl standing next to him, and apparently she was not 100% sure that my Uncle Pat, his sister, had an illegitimate daughter called Alice Ludden, standing there. So when I'm in this thing in the library, I thought, that's just like my bloody Uncle Pat and the little girl. Yeah, sulky little girl. Illegitimate. Terrible phrase, but anyway. So I thought, in terms of what you were just asking about the connection, you know, I'd love this picture and I'd got lots of emotions, lots of things. But then, suddenly, because I saw this picture in the library, I thought, that little girl is my tipuna. So it added another sort of dimension and feeling to the whole thing. Just saying. Yeah. So that tipuna thing has, I've got it, everyone has love of whatever kind, but there's something about iwi,
Te ao Māori.
tikanga, te ao Māori, mātauranga, that has another, you couldn't call it better, it's just, it's so real, and on the Western side of things, it's all real and it's all there, but it's been diluted and messed about with, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'll shush.
Thank you for that. No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. No reira, Sam, whakamarama mai ko ai koe, e hea tō hononga ki tō papa.
Ai, tika, ko tēnei taku papa. Ko ia te pau o te whānau nei, I te taha o tōku māma hoki. Ai, ko hamwera hau, ko tērā taku ingoa Māori, Sam is my other name, of course. Ai, te whakatipu a hau ki konei, ki te Wairarapa, nō reira. Ko rangi tūmau te maunga, rua mahanga te awa. A te wai I tipu ana hau I kōrero au I roto taku pepeha, ko taki timu taku waka. Engari kei te he tērā. Yeah, I was a confused child. Engari, I tipu ana a hau I rongi te whāriki o rangitāne raua ko kahununu kei ngā kohanga o te kohanga ka Ngāti Hamo. I ako nā hau te reo I te taha o taku whānau ko tērā te ao o taku tipuna, taku oranga o e rawa, ko te reo tuatahi mo taku tuahini, ko pets. Nō reira, ko tērā te ao Māori. That was normal for us. I haere ana mātou ki te marae, ki te oreore, nukutai. That was everyday life for us. Nō reira, you can kind of see the confusion of a child. Ka nohoa, ahakoa he mā taku kiri, he pōhe he au, he Māori. Nō reira, he nohoa hau, ki raro te rā I whiti ana, hei tini taku, te taia taku kiri. Hei haere ki te parauri haere taku kiri, engari...
Kirimi.
Whiro ke. Ai, no island taku whakapapa.
Me kōtirana.
Kōtirana, Scottish as well. And kei te ako tonu mātou, tā mātou whakapapa, no reira, e ako mātou no Lake District, mātou hoki. But the stories that I hold on to when I learn these whakapapa stories is quite a lot of our stories is next to water. And I imagine, you know, you grab onto the stories that relate to you, and I imagine our ancestors, our tipuna were growing up next to water, and the maunga and the whenua was part of who we are as working class. Yeah, so 80s child in Aotearoa, with all that, what that means. There were some dark places in Wairarapa, dark history, with all of the things that was going on in that time. And then, but we were brought into the whānau, a lot of people in Wairarapa around Whakaoriori, we counted as whānau, like cousins, uncles, aunties. We were, you know, ko tērā te tikanga o tēnei wāhi, manakitanga, ne?
Koina te āhuatanga Māori, ne? E hara koe I te tangata, ina ka haere mai koe ki te ao Māori, ko te iwi Māori katoa tō whānau.
Ai,
ne? Koina te take,
mehe mea
ko
ka
ngā ingoa, ko auntie mea, ko uncle mea, ka re paku whakapapa e hono I a korua, engari koina tō rāka ingoa, ne?
Ai, tika tō, kōrero, ai. Mehe mea ka huakina tō manawa, tō ngākau ki te ao Māori. You're sweet, you know, like, you really have to be open and you receive so much in return.
Yeah.
You know, like, I really don't understand the resistance some people have to te ao Māori and te reo Māori and pronunciation and all those things. Tika tō kōrero, trying and getting it wrong, kei te pai tērā.
Yep.
Kei te pai. But being resistant to saying it properly, like pushing back against correct pronunciation, for example, I cannot understand it.
Yeah.
I really cannot.
Kei hea te whainga I roto I tērā, ne?
Ai. Yeah, kei te he tērā. But trying and really trying to embrace it in every sense is you receive so much back. You know, like it can be a beautiful thing. But culturally, I think we've had, especially in the early days, when Dad was talking about the pushback, we were growing up through that. I think times are changing, and I really feel like we're living in a different place, but the context when Dad was talking is Te Reo Māori was on the verge of dying out in Wairarapa.
Absolutely.
And so the mahi, the foundation that this generation and all the aunties and uncles and did to raise up kohanga reo, whakanui te mana o te reo, te wiki o te reo Māori, all those different initiatives to build it. It actually rescued te reo. You know, like in Wairarapa, I don't know about other places around Aotearoa, but kei konei, that's the only reason why we still speak, you know. Those times were actually critical to the survival of te reo in Wairarapa. So, ka mihi, aho, ki a rātou, and kei te haere tonu tērā whawhai, ki te whakanui tērā kaupapa.
I heard you say a little bit earlier about how you get so much back from that effort that you put out, and I assume you're not just talking about your own hua, that you don't, when you put effort in, obviously you get the consequences of, oh yeah, I know how to speak te reo Māori, but I assume that you were talking about the community, the Māori community in general, giving back to, or bringing people in to circles where they feel like family. And so I guess my question is, when you were thinking back to those times where you were confused that you actually were Māori, is that because of how much you and your family had been embraced by the Māori community? Did you just feel like that was your whakapapa?
When you call someone cousin, you know, your whole life, or brother, or bro, or you know, sister, you know, like, we slept in the same bed, we had the same baths growing up, we did everything together, so of course you're part of the whānau, and that the taonga that you have inside of you is in te reo, me ngā tikanga Māori, te ao Māori, all those things that come with te reo, mahinga kai, hiika, hāngi, all those things, you know, like tangihanga, those affect your wairua, you know, like it sort of, it brings you up and down, and it's sort of like you're woven into it, tui ana. Yeah. And so when you discover, oh shoot, I'm not from here, you know, like as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, I did, what do they call it? Manu kōrero.
Oh, rangi. Te reo Māori.
I roto te reo Māori. For those that don't know, Manu kōrero is a speech competition that's been going for decades, and I think you were, did you do?
I did one in English.
Oh, you did yours in English?
My little brother, Whataora, did his in te reo and got to nationals.
Well, I got to regionals, and I did mine on taiaha, Mau Taiaha, because we were doing Mau Taiaha at the time. And but I was pretty, you know, I was a 13, 14-year-old, and for my pepeha, as I was saying, we'd do our pepeha, because I was part of the bilingual class at Hiona, with my mum, my sisters, akutuahine were at Rāwhiti and Kohanga, so we were in that world, and so iara ka ki atu tamato pepeha, ko rangi tūmau te maunga, ko waimahanga, te iwi, te awa, ko kahuna te iwi, a pera, and ko taki timu te waka. and e ki mai a pāpā me taku māma i tērā wā. Kao, kare, taki timu, e hara taki timu tō waka. What's my waka, Dad?
Well, you're talking about your mum's? Yeah, Southern Cross.
Southern Cross taku waka. Which is the ship that Mum arrived in the
Mine was a wakarere, rangi.
50s or 60s. And so that was traumatic for me. It was, honestly, it was...
Can I just say, I remember Manu one time, that's the middle child, Manu, coming home one day empty. She'd had some spat at school, some kids, probably a boy. And he called me a Pākehā. And we were like, well, actually, dear. Some people would say, look, see what you've done to that girl. Yeah, perfectly happy with that. But he called me a Pākehā. Yeah,
well, Pākehā, the word Pākehā, I've you know, there's been quite a lot of controversy about that word over the years. And again, I do not understand what's wrong with the word Pākehā.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the only terms in the world in terms of a nationality or a race where if you come from New Zealand, it's like the only place you can go or accept that word and be called a Pākehā, and you couldn't be called that anywhere else in the world. You know what I mean? There's nothing.
Part of our culture has placed that negativity about the word, but it doesn't exist.
No.
There's no negativity about Pākehā, te kupu Pākehā.
I mean, it's like a lot of words. It can be used as an insult, but it isn't.
It's just like for any kind of race that you know. Oh, Māori.
Use it as a
Māori,
yeah.
and then if someone's like, Pākehā, blah blah.
Nonsense.
Same.
But
now, how do you feel about the term?
Oh, I wear it proudly, you know, like we discovered over, you know, like you get older, whā tekau mā whā aku tau I nai nei, nō reira, it's a long life, you know, not as long as this old guy, but you grow your knowledge and you connect into your story, and the word Pākehā is part of my story, and so I grow. It's just like the new term, relatively new term for me, but I'm learning about it through my mahi, tangata tiriti. Really new for me. Like when I heard it working at Greater Wellington through my good mate Bart Cox and Raihania Te and you know, Amber Craig and all those guys, the activists of this generation, and you know, they were talking about, you know, learning about te tiriti, and I did a couple of courses, you know, wānanga on te tiriti, and learned a heap about the context of te tiriti ki Wairarapa, but in the bigger context of up north as well. And I kind of touched on that as a growing up, but it wasn't really a big thing for me, tiriti o Waitangi. But then going through it in the you know, Greater Wellington Regional Council context, regulatory context of the way these organisations operate, and how te tiriti don't necessarily drive those organisations. So I learnt how important it is for everyone in those organisations to learn more about what happened, our whakapapa of this whenua, you know. And te tiriti, tangata tiriti is someone who understands that and everything that means of, you know, colonisation. And I don't mean colonisation in a bad... I don't want to turn people off. That can turn people off, colonisation. But it's a reality. And when you're tangata tiriti, you understand that reality. And being I think for me, being a Pākehā, in the first instance, growing up, as Māori, but Pākehā, and then secondly, learning about te riti in the context of modern politics, I think you need to keep checking in with yourself and your interactions with people, because even as a person in a whānau that we are, you still get it wrong. You still, you know, you can still touch on people's trauma, and you can still upset people, you know, and you got to take that on and question. My best mate, Mihirangi, she always challenges me in a gentle way to just keep checking in. Make sure I use tangata tiriti. What did you do to improve our world? You know, every day. It's an ongoing thing.
I sometimes think she wants to do that to me, but she's too polite because I'm a
Kaumātua.
Yeah.
It's already too late for you, Dad.
She's probably thinking, ooh, I wish I could say.
What you were talking about touches on something that I guess for me, in the way that when I think of the name Sam Ludden, I think of your mahi in here, but also your connection to the environment, particularly the water and the rivers and the different streams and stuff like that. And you clearly have this ngākau mahaki ki ara momo mahi, ki ora era momo tohu, era momo mea, ki roto i te pūtai ao. No reira ki a hau nei, what I'm seeing is that I'm seeing someone that is, even regardless of his whakapapa, because when in te ao Māori, whakapapa can be exclusive, but when it comes to te ao Māori itself, it's open to everybody. That's what I love about our culture. Is like, yeah, you might not whakapapa into te ao Māori, but te ao Māori is still open to you, almost all of it, you know. And like you've got your connection to the way, your connection to the environment, and in your mahi, there's a lot of, I guess, your own whānau stuff in it, of course. But then there's, you know, I hear you talk about mātauranga, I hear you talk about the mātauranga of our tuna, I hear you talk about the mātauranga of the wai, you know. So, you know, tell me, why is it that you're so connected to those things, and why you still do it today?
Me pātai nui tērā, kei a koe te wā. Ai, te tai ao. I ki ana hau mō taku tipu ana ki kone. Ai, kei mai e rā wā, he wero mō tātou katoa. Growing up in those times is a challenge, because we grew up in a time of privilege, like privilege that I don't think we quite understand yet, because the tai ao still possibly you could regard as plentiful, and you could still go put a net in and get, you know, a net full of tuna, or you could find a kokopu, or, you know, you could have an experience in nature quite easily. Now, under our noses in the last 2-3 decades, these things are disappearing. Pērā ki te reo Māori, and I really feel like environment is a colonisation issue. Sorry to bring that in again, but I do believe it. And so I feel that wero deeply, and I feel that challenge to give back, because I want my girls, your kids, to be able to swim in the river, to be able to come face to face with a tuna, to find a moho or a gecko, or I mean, can you imagine having kiwi down at the park, you know, or can you imagine kereru through town, not just in the special places on the edge, you know, like in reserves with boundaries, you know, like that's not te ao Māori. I think in te ao Māori, it's a holistic way of viewing our place in the taiao, you know, like we don't own the whenua owns us, you know, like we are part of a system that's all connected, and I think I just feel that kind of really deeply, and I think everything I do tries to I inform everything I do with that idea of we are part of a system, and I see a deep disconnection that is slowly, I mean, when I think about collective memory or collective knowledge, I really think about the stories I was given growing up, you know, like kaumātua talking about their experience with tuna, and you know, like in the season of the heke tuna, you know, the tuna migration, they'll go down to the creek or the manga, and they'd hear it first, and they'll all rush down as kids, and the creek will be full of tuna, maha. Now I haven't seen that personally, but I feel like that's my memory, you know, like, and I have a responsibility to talk about that memory with the rangatahi that I work with, because it's our memory. And the unfortunate thing about humans is we live for a very short time, in terms of, if you put it into context of kahikatea or kauri, they live for thousands of years. They see a lot of change in that time. We're over like that, you know. And so when our, you know, like help me out with the whakatauki, when tōtara falls, you know, like you're losing more than just the raka, you're losing everything that comes with that. And so when someone passes, you're losing all of that memory that connects us right back. And so, yeah.
You feel like it's your responsibility to keep that memory alive?
Big time.
Yeah.
Because
it's
whakapapa, and it's in the regulatory space, at councils, regional councils, government, we forget. We're influenced by a lot of
3-year cycles.
Yeah, 3-year cycles, bro. And it really needs to be like, what is our vision? Who is giving the vision to us? You know? Yeah, if we think beyond the 3-year cycle, or you know, economic growth, or all those drivers that really drive our political scene, and think about what our kaumātua's stories, our tipuna stories are, and use those stories to create the vision, and include how we fit into the world, then I think that's true resilience. You know, and the awa and the wai that is running through our valley has been suffering for a long time. I used to be able to go for a swim down the river. I could drink the water and not get sick. You can't do that now. You cannot do that. It's we've been testing, monitoring the wai with our program with tauira, my kura kaupapa, my mākaura hoki, and we were testing yesterday. The Ruamahanga water is at ultra high levels of E. coli. As of yesterday, a river is always changing. Tomorrow it might be ketapai, but yesterday it was you wouldn't go in that water, and that's the reality of a relatively short period of time. So ahakoa, the fight of my dad's time was for te reo and you know, cultural change and our approach to race and te ao Māori and that kind of tiriti o Waitangi. I think our current battle is for the environment, and I think young people is going to be living through what we give them, and so I feel really deeply we have to fight for a better way, and really mātauranga give us all of the tools we need to change. Western science is a debatable thing. Science in its purity also gives us a lot of tools, useful tools, but right now I think we're driven by the political scene, and I really think mātauranga steps back from that, and it's a bigger holistic kind of view of the world, and so I embrace that, and I feel, because I've got the upbringing that I have, it's my responsibility to just to elevate it as much as I can as a Pākehā, as a tangata tiriti.
Ka rau e te kōrero. Ko rangona i te maha o ngā whakaro e pāna ki te reo me rātu āhuatanga o te ao Māori. Ko te whakaro o tēnei kiriata kia whakanuia i te reo Māori. Engari kia hau nei, kāre taia te kitea i te kāre taia te whakanuia i te reo Māori, ina kore ka whakanuia e rātu mea e hāngai ana ki te reo. Kāre taia te mohi o hea te mātauranga Māori i te kore kei reira hoki te reo. Kāre taia te whakanuia i tō tātou hitori, i o tātou whakapapa, i nā kore kei reira te reo. Nō reira, ko tōku i rangona nei, kua whawhai ke mātou mo te reo, i nāia nei me whawhai hoki mō tētahi whawhai pai anō. Koera te āhuatanga o te ao Māori, i nā kore ko te reo Māori, kare ko ngā āhuatanga Māori, kare ko te mātauranga Māori, ka waiho ko te reo ki tōna ake, you know, nō reira mea whawhai mō ngā mea katoa. Ake.
Me pēhea te ao, me he mea ka ngaro. You know, like, pēhea te ao o Aotearoa, me he mea ka ngaro. Tēnei tāo.
Mō te aha te reo ina kare ke a tātou te ao Māori. Ko e kore noiho.
Koia mai rano ngā kōrero ngā tipuna. Engari kare te au e rongo i a rātou. Koia. Mai rano.
Kei te tūwhiranga tairinga i nānei. E kare he option anō kia
Ai, tika.
Nō reira, ko tōku pātai whakamutunga. Ki tō koutou whakaaro, mō koutou wawata, mō mokopuna. Hea tētahi mea nui me whai ake tātou mō te reo Māori. He pātai anō, I roto I te reo Pākehā pia. What do you guys think about where the future lies in terms of our language? How, in particularly in relation to Masterton, where do you see the ngā taumata tiki for our entire community, not just for Māori, for our town? Where do you see, or where would you like to see our town in its relationship with te reo Māori?
Ko koe te tuatahi?
Well, tuatahi. I'm a bit out of touch nowadays, but so he whakaaro pānui. I think, I'm thinking of kura kaupapa and how it hasn't always been an easy run in all sorts of senses, all sorts of ways. Engari, kei te tipu tonu, kei konei tonu. Yeah, so kura kaupapa, kohanga, of course. Strong. Have issues, have problems, have setbacks, but basically strong.
Established.
They're here, that's it. And so that's a core thing that makes me feel very kind of optimistic. And not only that fact, but when I see, like, for example, we were at the, the council meeting that passed the motion for the Māori ward. That was like, but it wasn't just the fact of that happening, it was when young people, I've forgotten their names, there were two wahine spokespeople, and they stood and they spoke, and I thought to myself, by crikey, we're in safe hands here, we're in safe hands.
The way Tito and Amber.
Yeah. And it's like, well, and they didn't have to be like old farts like me, getting all stroppy. They just got putamanga, tikanga, beautifully spoken, clear, strong, immovable, but kind of, just an ahua, and I thought, things are going good, long way to go, be more battles, there's still some things, and I still think there are things that old farts like me need to get stroppy about, and because there are some strange people around, and I still believe, Sam tells me to moderate, and I agree it should be moderated, but this is me, so I think there's still a place for a bit of aggro. But now I think, I don't really know, but I feel a lot, I think things are a lot safer and a lot more reason for optimism than when I first got involved. I'd say that. Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
I mean, you're working with the next generation.
So, AI,
In terms of where I think Masterton is with te reo and adopting te ao Māori viewpoints, I agree with Dad. We've come a long way, but I keep seeing opportunities all over the place. For example, the Makota, the renaming of Makota, the proper from Makora, which means seagull, to Makota, which is the name of our awa. Those moments are opportunities, and relatively easy opportunities for us to embrace, and te reo me o na tikanga is what we were talking about, is like when we look at the place names around Wairarapa, around Masterton, there's a lot of information in those kupu Māori, you know, those ingoa Māori. There's a lot of, you know, Mākaka Weka, which is a contributory that comes into the Mākota. The Mākota is made up of 8 or 9 little fingers of punawai or springs or different influences off Upper Plain Road, and each of those names, people like Tony Garstang and others, and Joe Pōtangaroa, had to do quite a bit of research to find those old ingoa tika, and when you find them and you look at them, Mākaka Weka, for example, what does that tell us? Mā is short for manga, which is stream, makes sense. Kaka, what's that? It's a, you know, a manu that we don't see in Masterton anymore, haven't seen for 100 years. And Weka, man, I haven't seen any Weka around here for a long time, but it tells us that where Te Rete Mana Kōrau, our tupuna, and our tipuna Joseph Masters signed the deed for the farm association to sell Masterton to our community. It was signed on the bank of that awa, of that manga. And what was running around when they were, you know, like signing that bit of paper? There was manu, you know, like native creatures were plentiful. That's what that name tells us. And there's other names, you know, that we need to kind of elevate and celebrate whakanui te mana o te reo, o ngā wāhi rereke, o ngā wāhi tapu. You know, there's so many things in our landscape that can be informed by te reo Māori. I think those are the opportunities for Pākehā and Māori, you know, like it's not an exclusive thing for kura kaupapa or you know, young people or whatever. It's for all of us. It's a real gift.
There's just one thing that I think that you were picking up on, and it was mostly about, I think, what I would consider the identity of Masterton. And we sometimes forget that our identity is a bicultural one, where Joseph Masters and Rete Mana Te Kōrau came together to make it happen, recognising that we had a past, and then that Joseph Masters and his farming community were part of a different kind of community, but they had to interact with each other. And so what I'm kind of thinking today is, do we see a similar kind of, or what kind of identity is Masterton's now, and what do we think it should be? Like, is it more of a treaty-based relationship? Is it more of an identity about Masterton being a place that's rich in history when it comes to Māori things, and rich in the history when it comes to whakapapa that extends beyond Joseph Masters? You know, what is the kind of identity we should be seeing?
Could I just say a little thing? Yeah, I totally what you're saying. Engari, the hui, Joseph Masters in Rete Mana, and so the place was called Masterton. Why wasn't it, if that hui was a meeting between two equals of equal respect and equal standing, why the hell wasn't it called Whakaoriori Masterton? It is becoming that way now, but I have a lingering resentment over that fact that says, well, it wasn't really all that equal at all.
Yeah, I slightly I love this, because, you know, like when you look at our history and you look at the partnership between Māori and the settlers, yeah, it's fraught, and there's a lot to debate about it, but the sale of Masterton to the settlers It was quite a particular sail. It wasn't like Greytown and Papawai. It wasn't like, you know, further south in the Wairarapa. It was quite particular. And Masterton didn't, you know, like Kaiko Kirikiri Pā was up there, and the main settlement area of Masterton before Masterton existed was Kibble White Road and Akura and Kaiko Kirikiri. That's where the Namutawa Pā and those places were connected to whānau who still live here today. But Masterton was a swamp. It was a hole, and I'm pretty sure, and Joe and I talk about it quite a lot. Te rete mana surely would have known it's not a great place to put a town. You know, like
fair place, yeah.
Of course, you fellas can have that. Yeah, go for it. You know, like. But
Okay.
Joseph Masters was thinking, this is where we can put our roots. This is where we can lay down. It's obviously a beautiful and plentiful place, fertile place, because you know Makota and the Waipoua and the Waingawa was running all through Masterton. Not a very good place to put a town when you think about it, but it would have been beautiful. So maybe he arrived in the summer when it wasn't too bad, but in the winter, oh, what a place it would have been. Real tough place to live. So I think Masterton as a place and as a name shouldn't be like reduced as in its mana. I think it should be still held, just like Kaiko Kirikiri should be elevated.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, well, that's more like it then, yeah.
Whakaoriori should be elevated.
Yeah.
It's not that you reduce one.
Yeah.
That's what tangata tiriti needs to fight for, is that to recognise it as the same, you know, like it's same level. So Masterton is an interesting place, and environmentally, I feel like it's almost like we've lost so much biodiversity, and I really see that part in Masterton. And I see, oh no, scrap that.
Well,
I don't want to get
think
into
I see
that
what
dark
you mean.
space, you know. If you look around the whenua and how land is owned now, and you go to Te Oreore or any urupa, actually, any urupa, and you look around the urupa, where's the whenua owned by Māori? It's all disappeared, you know, like
It's pocket.
little
pockets.
islands of wahi tapu or urupa or whatever, and you're like, what the heck happened here?
So randomly surrounded by cows, or
Yeah. And if you really respect te ao Māori and everything that, you know, like the way Māori view the world, and you look at urupa with surrounded by cows or surrounded by industry, which is down up at Te Oreori, you're like, how's this respect? How's this equal? You know, like that really upsets me, and it upsets a lot of people. But you're like, what happened? What happened here for this to be like this now? And that's what Matua Ra gently talks about it. And I think, if anything, the Wairarapa way is, in terms of te ao Māori, is a very generous, manaki kind of way of being. It's gentle. The kōtahitanga is a Wairarapa, you know, part of our culture, is joining and being one. We've never had any pakanga or fighting here. Well, actually, no, that's not true.
No,
but,
but hardly any
in the
infighting.
scale
Yeah,
of things. It was,
so that's what we should be proud of.
Mm.
But there's a lot of work to be done.
Just one other thing, when you were talking before about treaty and you know, in all sorts of levels, local, regional, and government. So often seems to me like the mana of the treaty has gone up and up and up, and it's always being mentioned. But I sometimes, in my old stroppy head, I still sometimes think, even at the high level, good people, tamir, that the treaty is still, in terms of negotiation and recognition and acknowledgement, is kind of almost still a bit of an afterthought, you know. And to me, anything, decision making at all sorts of levels, even when it's not directly connected, the treaty should be right up there at the top of all negotiation, every time. And if its relevance is like shown to be not particularly relevant to the thing, it still needs to be right there at the top all the time, and not because people feel as though it should be. It should be, you know, if you're in any kind of position of authority and power, it should be like Sam was saying, it should be part of you, you know, not part of them. It should be part of you, the treaty. That's a bit of a vague way of putting it.
No,
but
it's
you see
good.
what I'm
I
saying?
think each of us individually have to figure out what that means for us.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm still figuring that.
Yeah, me too.
It'd be
Yeah. But
better
it's,
if our education system did anything about teaching.
That's right, I reckon.
that's right.
I reckon.
Yeah, koia.
Oh, brave new world.
Ko ia tērā kaupapa, ko tau, ngā whakaaro. Oh, rawe.
Ka nui te mihi.
Ka nui te mea kia kōrua.
Kia kōrua. Oh, Lord.
Cool. Future is bright.
Oh, that's good.
I was 30 when I came here. Funny old world.
Yeah, just check it down.